Hello.
Good morning, Rui. Bon
Good
dia.
morning. Bon dia. Uli, how are you?
I am very fine. How are you? Where am I catching you?
I'm in Lisbon right now.
In Lisbon.
In Lisbon, yes.
One of my last guests, he was also living in Lisbon.
There's a lot of people either living here or moving here. So I guess the ecosystem around here is very different from 10 years ago. So it's good. And the weather is pleasant. So
I know that there has been a boom in tourism throughout the many last years. Are you speaking about the business opportunities now?
I'm more focused on the business. I guess it all started again many years ago when Web Summit started to come here. But then more recently, there are many companies, international and some national startups and scale-ups that decided to actually have Lisbon as a hub for their base. So I guess the community was bootstrapped more than a decade ago, but now we're seeing the results of the community of builders and big companies that actually moved their offices here. So yes, the tourism is there, but also there is a lot of business investment here. And you see many AI hubs, startup hubs popping here and there, and many co-working spaces where you see young companies building a lot of great stuff out here from Lisbon.
And how does Lisbon compete with Porto?
It's different, right? So in terms of the ecosystem, in Porto, you will find companies and startups that are closer to the industry. So the north of Portugal is very heavy in terms of industry, very experienced. You have a lot of international brands, car manufacturers, textile that actually have their factories around Porto. So you'll see many of the startups in Porto leaning more towards logistics, supply chain, and of course a lot of AI in everything that relates to heavy manufacturing. In Lisbon, it's a bit more. Of course, there's also other cases, right? In Porto now, startups and companies focusing on healthcare and so on. So there's diverse, but there's leaning more towards, again, big volume manufacturing, at least traditionally. In Lisbon, it's a bit less. So I guess it's more scattered, the type of industries you will find here. But in both places, you have great ecosystems of people working from crypto to, supply chain, as I mentioned before. So I think they're very similar. Weather is different. Porto is also a smaller city, so it means it's cozier and you'll find a smaller community where everybody gets to know each other. So very competitive. And you do have companies that end up having hubs in both places. And that's the strategy that more and more companies are doing. And companies like Revolut, for example, have an office in Porto, and I believe they also have something in Lisbon.
Yeah. So when I said Porto, I tried to use the standard English way of pronouncing Porto, but of course you'd say o Porto.
O Porto, yes.
O Porto. So where are you actually from? Are you from Porto, Lisbon, or somewhere other place?
I'm not. I'm actually from Sintra, which is from a very small village in Sintra, close to Lisbon. But then the moment I started my professional life, I actually always lived away from Lisbon. So this is the first time that I'm now closer to home. But then when Venium started, I moved to Porto. And then after that, moving to the US and then back to Porto. So that's why I do sometimes have a northern accent, because I spent almost 10 years working with people from Porto with very strong, charismatic accents. And then I ended up inheriting a bit of that.
I'm not sure if you said charismatic accents or if you said charismatic people.
Both of them. So it's actually true. It's actually both charismatic people and accents.
And you already talked about Venium. And,
yes.
I followed the beginnings of Venium.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly the times when I read through your CV on LinkedIn. I actually made a note because I need to read from it to be sure I'm saying the right things. I actually saw on your CV that you were currently working on your master thesis that aims to develop agnostic applications development platforms for vehicular networks.
Exactly.
Vehicular networks. That was in 2010 to 2013, according to your LinkedIn.
That's
Um,
correct.
and I mean, Veniam, that was a long story, a successful story. That was your
Mhm.
transition to the US, I believe.
Yes,
But
it was
now
part
let
of the
me shut
journey.
up and you start talking about Veniam, because that's a huge success story, if I'm right.
Yeah, no, it was quite an adventure. So I did start working or researching about vehicular networks, vehicular mesh networks in the context of my master thesis. So I spent almost 2 years working on that. And the main goal was simple. How can we develop any kind of application on a network that is unstable, where vehicles are moving and you need to have a network topology that is different from a very cozy internet connection you get at home or you get in some mobile phones. So that's what I was doing, and then I was finishing my work, and that's when I met João. Totally random in an event, and then João was just saying, "Look, we are starting this company called Veniam, really to work on vehicular networks. Why don't you join us?" And that was the beginning of almost a decade of story and a lot of learning and an experience of a lifetime. So I was very fortunate to be in Veniam since the very beginning. So seeing the full inception of the company through all the phases, growth, um, fundraise, several pivots, and then ultimately the M&A at the end when we transitioned Veniam to Nexar. So it was an amazing journey. We learned a lot. We experimented a lot. One of the challenges were that we were developing a technology that was ahead of its time, right? So
Yes, that's
vehicles
what I imagine.
communicating. Yes, vehicles communicating with each other and vehicles that require a lot of data. It's something that we are seeing now becoming prominent, right? So we see Tesla and Waymo with all the technology right now and all the data that goes in and out. We were solving this problem many years before, right? And of course, we were trying to understand, okay, what's the right business to bring a technology that we deeply believe is the future of vehicle communication. So of course, that's a journey, right? That's something where we started learning. We started working with fleets of different kinds, public buses, closed environment fleets like we have in the ports and harbors. So we kept experimenting and growing. And also, there was no playbook on how to do this, right? As many startups, right? You cannot copy these kinds of things. So we did our best to keep growing and experimenting. Then at some point we started and we realized that the automotive industry had the same challenge. They had massive amounts of data in their cars. They actually had a lot of data in the cloud that need to go to the cars. So how can we bring our technology and help solve that problem? So that's when we started working closely with automotive industry in the US and also in Europe and Asia, and that was a moment that again the company kept growing and learning as a young startup, trying to work with giants, right? So that was the non-obvious thing on how can we do that. Then the pandemic hit, so we had to adjust our plans as pretty much everybody did with COVID, and then we realized that if we port our technology to be able to be run in any kind of mobile IoT device, it solves the same problem because we now have a bunch of devices that move from different places, have data that needs to go in and out. So why don't we just bring whatever we were working for cars and then bring for this type of devices? And that's when we started working with dash cams. So these cameras that you put in the cars that have a lot of data that is valuable to the drivers and to insurance companies, and then for public sector as well. And then that's the story when we started working with a number of companies. Among them, Nexar was one of them. So, and that was the very nice transition of this story and closing a chapter that continues. Was that it became very natural for Veniam to integrate Nexar because the product is able to live in. So the team still exists, the product is still delivering value. So I believe this was a really nice curve, a really nice curve of or a really nice arc of the story of Venom with all the ups and downs that any startup has. That was something very rewarding. And I learned a lot throughout this period. I was challenged by João and the team to have different roles. So I started as an engineer, just developing backend services in cloud and distributed systems, and then challenged to work in product, to be a managing director, working closely to the business and so on. So, and then of course later as a CTO in the last part of the journey. That was an amazing experience that I learned a lot, and still today I'm collecting and understanding many of the insights that I got during that period.
If I put that in my words, you started at Veniam as an engineer, you continued to develop, then you transitioned into becoming the managing director to launch the US business. In between, you were head of product, but later you became CTO. What a
Yeah,
ride! And now,
it was
and
quite a
now,
ride.
yeah, and now, if you put yourself into your current situation with your experience that you gathered after you left Veniam, when you transitioned into Nexa, now working at Indiecamper in a CTO role. Now, if you look back 10 years ago, or whenever exactly you founded or you were co-founding Veniam, um, what has developed in tech and AI that you struggled with back in the days that you wouldn't struggle with nowadays?
Oh, so many things have changed. Very often, I have the thought of if we had this 10 years ago, things could have been drastically different. Many things change, and let me break that down. So the first one is um, essentially AI and again, large language models accelerate our ability and quality of reading and accessing information. So even before we start creating software, we can now parse through extensive documentation, architectures, and access much more information that would take a lot more time in the past. We can process the research papers that are coming out in a much more frequent way. We can actually do that in parallel and ensure that we are not missing a very important detail because we were tired or because it was the fifth paper or the fifth article that we were reading. So we can essentially now parallelize ingestion of data, and data could be of many kinds. Again, new information, new research. KPIs that inform the business, performance of the existing software. So just on this data ingestion part, it's drastically different. It's much, much faster. So essentially, imagine we have kind of the same computing power in our brain, but we just increased the amount of information that we send to our brain. So really, if we think as a computer, we can actually use our processing capability in our brain in a way that would take much more time before, because again, data ingestion took forever. The second step is, of course, software creation. So if we think about the software development lifecycle, again, you had planning, then the development cycles, and then quality, verification, and then approval, and then you carry over, right? Now, pretty much all the steps were accelerated and can be done in a way that was not possible before. The first one is like even detailing the requirements of a certain software or product, right? You can not only produce those requirements faster, but you can actually debate those not only with your colleagues, but actually with a bunch of large language models that will be kind of adversarial to really test how good your idea is. Um, then, in terms of the software development, of course, that's one of the things that people started again maybe 2 years ago using as a chat interface. But now you have software creation that can happen with agents that generate software in parallel, but not only generate software, but they actually have the different parts. They have the front end developer agent, the back end, the QA analyst, the engineering manager. So you can have now an ecosystem of AI agents that kind of emulates the way teams work, but they don't stop. They don't get tired. And again, they can process information at a different speed. Then, depending on the businesses, you still have, again, pull request reviews and moments where you need to have a human verifying that the code we are going to launch is good. And
Mhm.
this is the interesting part, because yes, you can still automate a bunch of that, but for some critical systems, now you're putting a lot more weight in the person or in the people who are reviewing the code to ensure that, again, you didn't generate AI slop, or the soft, because of lack of context, you're not generating something that will break a system that was poorly documented. So again, the same analogy of reading, it's now the same thing. So now there's a lot more information and data and software being produced and putting a lot more effort and emphasis on our ability to process that information, use our brain to decide this is a good software or not. Okay, because we still, the same way we provide feedback to engineers, we now need to provide to agents and engineers as well that are operating agents. So then, of course, the deployment part and infrastructure, you can do things today you can that are much more automated than before, especially if you're dealing with large cloud infrastructures. Of course, you can still make mistakes, but again, putting the emphasis on the people to make these decisions. So what changes is, the question is what doesn't change, right? So so many things change. The productivity and the output you can have as a product development company is fantastic. You can test ideas, and before you probably had to do a PowerPoint and an analysis to validate an idea, present to a group and get feedback. Now you can even actually test that with agents. So Shopify launched a tool very recently where you can actually, when you launch an online store, you can actually have a bunch of AI bots emulating and simulating as AI agents how people would behave on your website based on data. So now A/B testing is different, because A/B testing that I will roll out a feature to a few clients. Now you can actually test at scale with agents that will emulate user behavior, and then you make these decisions to inform your product. So it's fascinating, the things you can do right now. And I think we are already seeing a first wave where well-established software companies and software products that were out there that were virtually impossible to build now are actually possible to be built by smaller teams. If you have, let's say, invoice management software that you were paying the license for, but it was very specific to our business, that didn't cover all the bases. Now you can have your team actually build that in a way that you don't need to pay, or this is just for infrastructure. So many things have changed. It's not. It's a good exercise to think how we would do things different in the past. But I think the most interesting exercise is how can I change what I do today and challenge myself to, if I'm doing something automatic, how can this be different by the fact that AI is here to be used and it's not going anywhere, and is also getting cheaper, or at least on the cost per token dimension.
Yeah. You mentioned that what is not changing, what doesn't change. And it reminded me of a German saying, and maybe it exists in the English language too. I'm trying to translate it. And it says, nothing is as stable as change.
Yeah.
So what is the stable, uh, um, basically the stable
Mm-hmm.
thread throughout all of this huge development and quick changes in tech and AI? What is the stable factor? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let me ask you openly, and then let me ask you towards a specific topic.
I think the one thing that, regardless of having a AI or not here, is that the end of there are two main things. One is that we still have to deal with people. Organizations are still made out of people, big or small organizations, right? So at the end of the day, even though you may have AI generating software and reviewing and doing your marketing communications, you still have people that you need to engage with and communicate and actually extract the big value out of organization, which is the quality of the interactions between the people that make those organizations, right? And even if you think, okay, organizations now can be managed by AI agents, at the end of the day, again, the big businesses, the impactful business still require a lot of people interaction. So whatever you needed to know how to do 10 years ago in conflict management and how to provide feedback on how to set goals, now it's not only necessary, but it's even more important, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make the difference. Your ability to build a fantastic team, the ability to articulate the priorities in a way that humans can understand, right? So that's one thing that doesn't change, because it's still fundamental for very successful organizations. The second aspect is the business itself, designing a business, right? Because if there's a business that is simple to recreate with AI, you are now competing with a much more developer based. So a young student with 14 years old based out of a small country can actually build something that is that was only possible with a large engineering team before. So the ability to think, what's the right business that I need to do? What's the right business model? How do I sustain this? How do I deliver value to a customer? That's still a problem that you need to solve. And again, in both of these, you can still use AI to assist you, but at the end of the day, you are the one making the decision by dealing with people and setting a business that is sustainable for the future. So those are two things that come to mind that are important to keep in this AI world.
And that's exactly where I wanted to go with my second question, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, first I openly asked, but then I wanted to ask specifically about leadership. But
Yep.
that's exactly what you already mentioned. And during the last week's talk, I talked more and more about AI in my podcast, but also with people that I meet in business scenarios and situations. And it's very interesting that it always comes back to this point where everybody recognizes that AI will not replace humans when it comes to managing, when it comes to leading teams, at least not for now.
Yes. And I think it will take a while, right? Again, you still have maybe or oftentimes we are biased by, again, the bubble we live in. We think about the software products we use, the app, and so on, but they are amazing, massive businesses that are physical, right? That you cannot replace simply with AI. And those are strong pillars of our society, and those are not going to be replaced with AI. Those are not going anywhere. What happens is that those will actually have a lot more value. So the wood crafter that again is the specialist on building doors for churches in Italy, that business is not going anywhere, right? So what can happen is that that business will have a lot more exposure to AI, and again, you still need to have people. So yes, many things will change, but if we move a bit away from the software and AI world, there are many businesses that still need to exist, and we just need to look around where we normally are. So I think there's a few things in terms of leadership and communication and so on that do change when we think about AI. So and this is coming in waves, and the waves are very interesting. So many months ago, there was this impression that anyone can build anything. So people started building these apps and prototypes, and yes, it looks fantastic, and it's in a website, and then I click and I send to my friends, and they click. But then recently, they started realizing, wait a minute, how do I deal with cloud infrastructure? How do I deploy this? It's not working. How do I debug this? AI, why is this not working, right? So when there's an initial excitement of an amazing can-do attitude that then is now getting connecting with reality where things are not as obvious. But again, yes, people will then solve this problem now to make a big part of this process, but this was already true before. The other thing is, in terms of leadership, that is important to take into account, besides, again, setting the expectation that some things are still complex, is this idea, and this is the accelerator break, where on one hand, people are very skeptical about using AI for certain things. Oh, I don't think AI is able to do that. On other hand, they use AI for so many things that they unplug their brains. So the ability to find this sweet spot, and as a leader and as a manager, to both incentivize your teams and peers to use AI, but at the same time ensure that that excitement doesn't create blind spots, is two things that leaders really need to pay attention.
Thank you so much, Rui, for sharing your insights, for sharing your wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, are you still here?
Yes, I am. I can still. I don't see you, but I can still hear you.
Okay, let's hope that it will upload.
There's one thing. If I can, if whatever I say now can still be used on this point.
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so I'll just say something, and then you will decide if it's useful. So one thing that I'm thinking more and more is that how AI is changing the way we educate the future professionals, right? And we come out of a very interesting decades where in the beginning, or we are in an interesting decade where in the beginning we had the pandemic, so students had to study remotely. Professors were, again, working from home, trying to find ways to still give the hard feedback that students need to hear, and at the same time be pedagogical in the process while they're themselves going through a big change, as everybody was. And then now we enter a phase where, again, AI is here and makes things sound super, super simple. And there's this debate about should ChatGPT and similar products be used in schools, yes or no. But I read the other day a very interesting take of a professor that I don't remember where he was taking. So instead of saying, don't use ChatGPT, do it the old way, or okay, I don't care if you use ChatGPT, it was positioned differently. The ask for this exercise was, you have to use ChatGPT, but your exercise is to find where ChatGPT was wrong and explain why. And I think this is a very interesting take that applies to education, but actually applies to software and to anyone using AI, because two things happen. The number one is that incentivizes the use of a technology, which, again, I think it's great. The second thing is that it actually forces people to think deeper. And I think that's directionally where there's a lot of potential. There are many things that need to change, but if we keep in mind that these systems are here to help, and now putting a lot more emphasis in our compute power, in our brains, and forcing us to use them more and more in smarter ways, I think this can actually be a fantastic leap forward for the entire humankind.
I love this. Thanks for this plaidoyer. And I actually have 2 teenager kids. They use ChatGPT for school every day. And I tell them, don't necessarily trust ChatGPT. So I'm naturally doing what you are saying. And I think that's, in fact, very, very important to start thinking yourself. So once again, Rui, thank you so much.
Uli, it was a true pleasure. Thank you so much for this.
And one last question. Now let's talk offline world. What are you up for next in Lisbon during Christmas time?
Family time, and I always like to use this period to plan and think about the next year. So it's a reflection period, and that's what I'm going to do. Reflect, spend some time outdoors, enjoy the fact that it's still a good weather here in Lisbon, and we're very fortunate for that, and re-energizing for a very exciting 2026.
Nice. And if I were you, and if I may add, I would also have a pastel de nata.
Maybe more than one, just to confirm that the first one was good.
Yes.
All right.
Talk soon, Rui. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have an amazing day.